Hey, everybody. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Thanks for coming. We are here today with an amazing guest, but we'll get to that in a minute. Hey, JC, how you doing up there in upstate New York?
I'm doing pretty good. I feel overshadowed by the amazingness of our guest today. I can't even lie. I was doing a little bit of research before the program, pulling together some statistics and information, and oh my gosh, the best-selling books. And I don't. Is there audio tape? I gotta find out if he's got an audio recording of this for the. Anyways, I'm enamored. I feel starstruck today, so I'm gonna go back in my hole and stand by till it's my time.
I love it. I actually feel the same way. His website's so bright. So everybody, without further ado, welcome to the show, Dom Brightman. He is the best-selling author, certified leadership trainer, and podcast host whose tagline is to advance others, to advance yourself. Welcome, Dom.
Woohoo! Thanks a bunch, Wendy and Jim. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to a fun in the bun chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time today. Hey, tell our listeners about your passion for leadership and personal development.
Sure thing. I'm really passionate about leadership and personal development because the thing is that years ago, I had a moment where I really wasn't about it. And then when I discovered it for myself in the middle of an IT degree, I realized, oh, wow, there's gold beneath my feet when you actually focus on intentionally developing yourself and realizing that leadership starts with you before you get to the others. So, yeah, I'm really passionate about leadership. Read a bunch of books about it, especially from John Maxwell. Dude changed my life with his writing, and words lead to wealth, and that ain't just money. That's also the wealth of the people that you help and help advance in life. And I'm proud to say that I'm one of the folks that he's helped with his words. So your words today can inspire someone tomorrow.
It really can. It's often the very little things, and the two words, they're called thank you, completely free. And when they're sincere, they really can change somebody's day and therefore their week, their month, their life. So talking about emotions, I wanted to ask you a few questions about emotional intelligence. How can HR professionals and managers in today's insane world cultivate emotional intelligence within their teams? And why is it so crucial in today's workplace?
Powerful question and a good one indeed. And the thing is about emotional intelligence, the wonderful EQ is that, hey, it's about being aware of others, but also being aware of yourself. And it starts with yourself, hence self-leadership. You got to regulate yourself first. It's easier said than done, but there are some times where you have to really make sure that you do whatever you can to make sure you're work ready. Because even though we have the one life to live, when you go into your workplace, even if it's a few steps to your computer remotely, like, hey, you got to bring the best you that you can be, even if that's 75% of you that day, to your place of employment. And it just starts with doing something to really get yourself ready before you get around other people. And when you get around other people, make sure that you have empathy to be able to have a listening ear. Active listening is one of the biggest keys when it comes to emotional intelligence. It's like, hey, because I remember 4 years ago, sadly, when the George Floyd situation happened, it's that Toastmaster group of mine. One guy was really hot. He was hey, rightfully so about the whole situation. And I was basically president of that club at the time. And I basically had to be the listening ear for him and a bunch of other people because just seeing that horrific situation happen, and he wanted to make the whole meeting about that. And I'm like, well, understandably so. Let's mention it because it was the elephant in the world at the time. But let's still make sure that we don't turn this into a place where it's all about what's going on outside. Like, hey, people come to this place in particular to get their mind off the world for a bit and work on themselves and their personal development. So having that active listening ear, making sure you listen to your people, being ready to listen and planning accordingly afterwards, making sure that you keep the whole group in mind as much as possible.
Research from Talent Smart shows that 90% of top performers possess high emotional intelligence, underscoring its critical role in achieving workplace success. Emotional intelligence allows individuals to better manage stress, communicate effectively, and navigate complex social dynamics, all of which are key to maintaining high levels of performance. Back to you.
Thanks for that. And yeah, Dom, I totally agree. I mean, listening is the first thing you can do. Even if our listeners are going, oh, I don't know about this emotional intelligence stuff, or I don't understand it. Just listen. And half the time, that's all people want. Now, in the HR space over here, we do have to do a little bit more than listening, because
Oh,
if
yeah.
we hear something, we may have to act on it, maybe a violent situation, whatever it might be. But truly listening to people around us, it makes such a difference. And I want to jump over to one of your books and have you talk to us about that, because I think this all kind of falls in line here. Tell us about your book, Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. Just tell us a little bit about that and how it can affect people's lives.
Sure thing. Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy. Myself and about 25 other authors contributed a story to that wonderful book. And the foreword for that book was written by the legendary James Redfield, author of the Celestine Prophecy. So for those who have a spiritual bent outside of the workplace and love that book, he wrote the foreword to this one. And my particular chapter was all about discovering self-development for myself and 4 wonderful keys for rock solid optimism. And I'll just quickly go through them. Is RAVE, rave. And even though we're not on video, folks, I know Wendy and Jen probably like, oh yeah, this background, it makes sense. It's called rave. So the R stands for reading, A stands for audio immersion, V stands for visual stimulation, and E, encouraging yourself and others. So it's really just that one piece and a bunch of other stories from other folks who've been through some real stuff, like from parents who raised their kids one way and they went a particular other way, and just dealing with that, from a nurse who had to deal with a certain situation that happened in a certain year that shall not be named.
Gotcha.
Transformational joy. It's strong, actually. And what he's saying is also backed up by science and statistics. I've got one for you here as well. 86% of employees who experience a strong sense of purpose and joy at work report higher levels of engagement and satisfaction, as according to the Harvard Business Review 2021. Back to you.
Hey, Dom, what advice do you have for business owners and managers on fostering a culture of continuous personal development amongst their employees, especially if they might have a budget of zero?
Funny thing is, like, hey, if your budget's zero, there are so many darn options out there. Freaking YouTube University is right there for the pickings. Content uploaded every freaking day. My man Jim's probably got statistics. This might even be multiple times a minute. Content's going on that darn site, bro. It's insane.
Yeah.
And one thing that folks can implement is basically implementing and it depends on your place of business. Like if it depends really where you are. But one thing that happened in my past life when I was working in a local library is that our manager was all about personal development. She basically set the tone and was the example. And once a week, an hour a week would be dedicated towards self-development time. So whatever book, a podcast, TED Talk, like something, dedicate yourself an hour to that particular topic, and then check in with your manager afterwards after that week to go over what you learned and see if it was useful or not. And then that way you can set aside that one uninterrupted hour for that self-development time. And the beautiful thing about that is that if your budget's zero, but you can still set aside that time, it's still considered work. You're helping your staff to develop. And a lot of folks enjoyed that time, myself included. I got to catch up on things. And even at the beginning of this process, what she did was she had everybody go through, I believe it was called the VARC assessment, where you basically take this quick assessment before the 1 hour week thing started to see where you learn best. And my strongest points were audio and visual in terms of learning. Like when it comes to hearing things and also seeing things done in action, that's where I learned best. So not only did I get that hour a week, at the beginning of everything, the foundation was laid where, all right, so you prefer audio? Podcast might be a thing along with TED Talks. I know we're in a library, we got books. Hey, you might not like books as much, but hey, ebooks might be better for you. So just making sure you're the one setting the tone and then having that good foundation in place to where, hey, why don't we just start with knowing where you learn best and then focusing on developing you in that area of strength. So that way you're so strong in one area, it just pours over into the other areas.
Yeah. And also, for our listeners, remember that adults learn differently than children. I know for me, just like you were just saying, Dom, I have to be doing something to learn it. So if I'm just listening to it, but I'm not sitting in front of the computer actually practicing what I need to do, then it goes in one ear and out the other. 6 months from now, I go, oh yeah, I have a training on that somewhere. Let me dig that up. But there's many times I have to be like, I want to do that training, but I'm not prepared to do that skill yet. So I can't even, why waste my time doing the training? Let me do that later. JC, it sounds like you have something to say there.
No, it's funny that you mentioned it that way. For myself, if I'm listening to something while I'm driving, then I'm learning. And then I need to go put it into practical application and listen to it about 12 more times, but it's like, I gotta be doing something at the same time. Or if I'm just sitting in a class taking notes, it's not working because I'm like literally critiquing the trainer, and that it doesn't end well, because I got a whole monologue going on in my head then by the end of it.
Right. Yeah. And we have to understand that our employees or the people, we are friends with or live with, that everybody learns differently. So figure out what their style is, and then, make sure the manager knows that, hey, it's not a one size fits all when you're training new hires or employees on new skills. Speaking though of personal development, Dom, how many books do you have?
Wow. Books that I've written, I actually have about 5 to my name, if I'm remembering correctly. So there's the first 2 books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, which eventually became a podcast, interviewing other authors. Stay the Course. That one probably is the one to pick up for folks, since we mentioned emotional intelligence. That book is all about self-awareness and the 7 keys that branch off from self-awareness. Then there's Crap It Happy. That's book 3, which is mentioned earlier. Then there's a 4th book that I didn't market that as much because I basically just added an old chapter to that one, but that was a good one. Fold 4, Formula for All Things Wellness. And the 5th and final book for now until the 6th book is The Advancement Compass, based off of chapter 5 from the first book, Going North, where it helps you to plan out your days, where you start off with asking yourself, what good will I do today? Then at the end of the day, there's about 3 other questions in between. But at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what good did I do today? It's all about making sure you create some good throughout your day, no matter how small it is.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit about, day planning and time blocking. I'm huge on that. If you ever saw my calendar, you'd be like, oh my God, this is embarrassing, Wendy, because every moment is filled up. I literally even have in there, do laundry.
Hey, you're a high performer and you're a D on the disc, right? So it's
yes,
expected.
I am. It's like you know what you're talking about. Yes, I am off the charge, dominant, direct on the disc, and I have to be busy at all times. And so I literally put on my calendar, you will relax and watch Netflix now.
I mean, sometimes you have to do it that way. Some folks even call that the 15-minute miracle, where folks like you plan those 15-minute blocks. Heck, maybe even deeper than the 15 minutes. Maybe you got 5-minute blocks. I don't exactly know, but hey, it just shows that you're all about getting the most out of life. And that's a wise policy, because the thing is, you have to schedule things, because time will escape you. Like this month in particular, I refuse to believe it's near the end of September. I don't even feel like September happened.
I know, right? I cannot believe it's October basically.
Yeah.
JC has a stat on time blocking that he wants to share.
I do. I'm chomping at the bit with this one. Look, people who use time management techniques like time blocking, they are 80% more likely to meet deadlines and be productive. That's according to the Harvard Business Review. And when we think about time speeding up, it is a true thing. I mean, we're all getting older. It's happening, right? 83% of adults report that feeling that time passes more quickly as they grow older is a real thing. And that's according to a study published by Frontiers in Psychology 2019. Back to you.
Yeah, I definitely encourage everyone who's listening to figure out what works for you. What works for me is possibly won't work for you. But my biggest thing with time planning is backwards planning, to say, when's the deadline, self-imposed or otherwise, and then figure out, okay, how, what are the steps that I need to take? Because often we go, oh yeah, I'll have this done by Friday. And you're really like, oh yeah, 4 Fridays from now, not this Friday. I'm not getting it done. Too funny. Well, I absolutely adore your podcast and all of your books. For those that have not been onto Dom's podcast, it is called Going North, and it's your one-stop shop for inspiration, information, and motivation on your author journey. And before we go on a little bit more, any, quick pieces of advice for somebody who is saying, you know what, I want to write a book. I've got something to say. What's your number one or maybe top 3 pieces of advice for them?
Sure thing. First piece of advice, same thing my coach shared with me. Ink it when you think it, because you're going to have thoughts, especially if you're really gung-ho about writing a book, and especially if you're listening to a podcast like this, especially if you have a guinea pig mode that you're in where you love personal development. Like, ink it when you think it. Always have something nearby to write an idea down. Have the recording app ready on your phone to record it. Make sure you actually go back on it later, because I've been guilty of recording stuff and forgetting I actually recorded stuff. And number 2 would be to write an outline for your book. You don't have to have the title yet, because to be honest, your title or your book is always going to evolve. My first book, the title evolved probably 3 different times after I figured out what the main title was going to be about 3 months before the book was actually published. So write an outline. And the third piece would be, done is better than perfect. The goal for my first book was to have 100 pages done. And I gave myself a deadline, because deadlines put a dead end on procrastination. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was going to have 100 pages. I wanted to have 100 pages, but I was getting close to that deadline of 1 year to getting the book done. And I was like, well, let me go with what I have. There's a book out there with 27 different editions. I could probably do the same thing. Let me just put this first book out now, test the market, see if it'll work. So just a quick recap: ink it when you think it.
Love it.
Create an outline, and be okay with making sure your book is done rather than being perfect.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. This has been great. Hey, Dom, how can our listeners find you and connect with you online?
Woohoo. Well, it's easy as pie. Everything is at dombrightman.com. If you're looking for me on social media, it's all at Dom Brightman. Easy branding, easy to find me. DOMBRIGHTMON. All things Dom on dombrightman.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure that we put that website in the notes of the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. Best-selling author, certified leadership trainer, podcast host, Dom Brightman. And for those who are looking for some fun little things to start their day, consider checking out JC's Interesting Things with JC podcast. Each episode is just 2 to 5 minutes. Find it on all your podcast platforms or at jimconnors.net. We hope this information has been helpful. Thanks for joining us, and take care.